A split-second decision on a deserted highway changed 3 lives forever. When Officer Bradley Miller decided to humiliate a calm, well-dressed black man over a fabricated traffic violation, he thought he was untouchable. He had no idea the man he was terrorizing had the chief of police on speed dial. The digital clock on the dashboard read 8:45 p.m. Route 114, winding through the quiet, affluent outskirts of Brookhaven, was nearly pitch black, illuminated only by the sweeping headlights of Harry Henderson's vehicle. It had been an exhausting week. Harry, a 42-year-old senior federal prosecutor, had just wrapped up a grueling racketeering case against a local syndicate. He had spent the last 2 hours at the gym trying to sweat out the residual stress of the courtroom because his primary vehicle, a sleek new Volvo sedan, was in the shop for routine transmission maintenance. Harry was driving his daughter's car, a 10-year-old slightly beat-up Honda Civic with a cracked rear bumper. He was wearing faded gray sweatpants and a worn-out Georgetown University hoodie. To the untrained eye in the dark in that particular car, Harry did not look like one of the most powerful legal minds in the state. He looked like an easy target. 2 miles behind him, tucked into the shadows of an abandoned gas station, sat Oak Ridge County Police Cruiser 44. Inside were Officer Bradley Miller and his new partner, Rookie Officer Thomas Wright. Miller was a 12-year veteran of the force, a man whose personnel file was a thick ledger of use-of-force complaints, intimidation tactics, and settled lawsuits that the county had quietly paid out to make disappear. He had a reputation for aggressive policing, specifically targeting older, less expensive vehicles driven by minorities passing through the wealthy Brookhaven corridor. Beside him, 23-year-old Thomas Wright sat nervously. Wright was only 3 weeks out of the academy, a bright-eyed kid from a neighboring county who still believed in the pristine honor of the badge. "Look at this guy," Miller muttered, spitting a stream of sunflower seed shells into an empty styrofoam cup. He pointed a thick, calloused finger at the taillights of the passing Honda Civic going exactly the speed limit, hands rigidly on the wheel. "He's trying too hard not to be noticed." "He's doing 45 in a 45, Brad," Wright offered hesitantly, glancing at the radar gun. "Seems fine. That's how you know they're hiding something, Tommy." Miller sneered, throwing the cruiser into drive and flipping off the headlights. Nobody drives the exact speed limit on 114 unless they've got warrants, drugs, or a suspended license. "Let's go fishing." The cruiser surged forward, eating up the asphalt in the dark before abruptly snapping on its headlights right on the Honda's rear bumper. A single set of headlights illuminated the night, painting the surrounding pine trees in frantic strobing colors. Inside the Civic, Harry's heart instantly plummeted. It was a visceral, involuntary reaction, a cold spike of adrenaline that he had experienced a handful of times in his life. He immediately checked his speedometer, exactly 45 miles per hour. He checked his mirrors. His blinkers were functioning. His headlights were on. He knew he had done absolutely nothing wrong. Taking a deep, stabilizing breath, Harry activated his right turn signal, slowly pulled onto the wide gravel shoulder, and shifted the car into park. He rolled down all 4 windows, a habit he had developed years ago, turned off the engine, turned on the interior dome light, and placed both hands firmly at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock positions on the steering wheel. He waited. In the rearview mirror, he watched the cruiser's doors open. 2 officers stepped out. One, a stocky, broad-shouldered man with a tight buzz cut, swaggered toward the driver's side, unhooking the heavy metal flashlight from his belt. The other, a younger, slimmer officer, approached the passenger side, hanging back slightly. Officer Miller stopped just behind the B-pillar of the Civic, tactically out of Harry's peripheral vision, and shined the blinding thousands of lumens beam of his flashlight directly into the rearview mirror, reflecting straight into Harry's eyes. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Miller barked, his voice dripping with unwarranted hostility. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't state his name or the reason for the stop. "Good evening, officer," Harry said, keeping his voice remarkably even, calm, and resonant. "My license is in my wallet, which is in my back right pocket. The registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. How would you like me to proceed?" Miller scoffed, leaning closer to the window. He could smell the faint scent of eucalyptus from Harry's gym soap. "I said, give me your ID. Stop playing games and hand it over. I'm simply informing you of the location of my documents, so there are no sudden movements, officer," Harry replied politely. He slowly removed his right hand from the wheel, reached into his back pocket, using only his fingertips, and extracted his leather wallet. He handed his driver's license through the window. Then he leaned over slowly, popped the glove box, and handed over the vehicle's paperwork. Miller snatched the documents. He shined the light directly into Harry's face, studying his features with a scowl. "Harry Henderson, you're a long way from home, Harry. What are you doing out here in Brookhaven?" "I was at the recreational center on 4th Street," Harry answered. "I'm heading home." "Recreational center?" Miller repeated mockingly. "In this piece of junk? Car's registered to a Sarah Henderson. Who's that? You steal this from a relative?" "Sarah is my wife," Harry said, his jaw tightening slightly, though his tone remained perfectly professional. "Officer, if you don't mind my asking, what was the reason for this traffic stop?" Miller leaned his heavy forearms against the window frame, invading Harry's personal space. "You swerved, crossed the double yellow line back by the mile marker. Then you failed to maintain your lane." "With respect, officer, I did neither of those things," Harry stated factually. As a prosecutor who spent his life analyzing dash cam footage, he knew exactly how he had been driving. "I maintained my lane and the speed limit." "Are you calling me a liar, boy?" Miller's voice dropped an octave, the hostility morphing into a dangerous, barely suppressed rage. The use of the word boy hung in the cold autumn air, a deliberate, heavy insult designed to provoke a reaction. On the passenger side, Officer Wright shifted uncomfortably, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Brad," Wright murmured over the roof of the car. "We got the ID. Let's just run it." "Shut up, Wright," Miller snapped without looking away from Harry. He tapped his flashlight against the window frame. "I asked you a question. You calling an Oak Ridge County police officer a liar?" "I am stating that your assessment of my driving is factually incorrect," Harry replied, looking Miller dead in the eye. "Now, are you going to write me a citation for this alleged swerving, or am I free to go?" Miller smiled, a cruel, thin stretching of his lips. "Oh, you're not going anywhere. We're going to have a long, long night." He took the documents and marched back to his cruiser, leaving and sitting in the chilling air. Harry closed his eyes for a moment. He knew exactly what was happening. This was a classic pretextual stop escalating into a fishing expedition. He slowly reached down to his wrist. With a subtle double tap on the face of his smartwatch, he activated a customized safety protocol he had programmed months ago. It silently dialed an emergency contact, a direct unmonitored line, and opened a live audio feed. Back in the cruiser, Miller tossed Harry's license onto the glowing laptop keyboard. "Run it," he commanded Wright. "Check for warrants. Check the national database. Check if he's got priors for narcotics." Wright nervously typed the information into the terminal. The screen blinked, loading the data. Brand? "It's coming up clean. No warrants, no criminal history, 0 traffic violations in the last 12 years. The car is fully insured, registered to his wife. No red flags." Miller slammed his hand against the steering wheel. "Bullshit. Look at him. Look at the way he's sitting there all smug. He's hiding something. Probably moving weight. I bet there's a brick of fentanyl in that trunk. Brad, we have no probable cause, Wright pleaded, his voice cracking slightly. He was driving fine. His record is spotless. Let's just give him a warning for the swerving and let him go. I am the senior officer here, Wright. You don't tell me what we have. I smell marijuana. I didn't smell anything, Wright said, his eyes widening. You've got a cold, Miller stated, glaring at the rookie with eyes that promised severe retribution if he was contradicted again. I smell raw marijuana coming from the vehicle. That gives me probable cause to search. Watch and learn how real police work is done. Miller unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped back out into the night. He unclasped the retaining strap on his holster, resting his right hand casually near the grip of his service weapon. He marched back to the driver's side of the Civic. Step out of the vehicle, Miller ordered. Officer, Harry said, his hand still gripping the steering wheel. I have provided my identification. I have no warrants. You have issued no citation. I decline to exit the vehicle. This isn't a request. Step out of the damn car, Miller yelled, violently grabbing the door handle and pulling. It was locked. Unlock the door, or I will smash this window and drag you out by your hair. Officer Miller, Harry said, reading the man's name tag clearly. I am ordering you to call a supervisor to this location immediately. You are escalating a routine traffic stop without reasonable, articulable suspicion or probable cause. Oh, we got a roadside lawyer, Miller laughed mockingly. I've got probable cause, counselor. I smell marijuana coming from your vehicle. Now step out. Harry knew the odor of marijuana loophole was the oldest trick in the book for a dirty cop to bypass the Fourth Amendment. He also knew that refusing a lawful order to exit a vehicle, even an unjust one, could legally lead to him being physically dragged out or shot. Slowly, deliberately, he unlocked the door and pushed it open, stepping out into the cold night. Before Harry could even fully stand, Miller grabbed him by the shoulder of his hoodie, spun him around with aggressive force, and slammed him chest first against the side of the Civic. The metal dented slightly under Harry's weight. Spread 'em, Miller barked, kicking Harry's feet apart violently. You are assaulting me, Harry stated, his cheek pressed against the cold metal of the roof. I am unarmed. I am not resisting. My hands are visible. Shut your mouth, Miller began, patting Harry down, his hands moving roughly over Harry's pockets, explicitly trying to be as degrading as possible. He pulled out Harry's phone, his keys, and a pack of chewing gum, tossing them carelessly into the dirt by the side of the road. Wright stood a few feet away, his face pale, his hands shaking as they hovered over his utility belt. He looked terrified. You know this is a violation of my civil rights, Harry said quietly, turning his head just enough to make eye contact with the rookie. Officer Wright, is it? You have a duty to intervene. You are witnessing a deprivation of rights under color of law. Wright swallowed hard, taking a half step forward. Brad, he doesn't have anything on him. We checked his pockets. Let's just back off, Wright murmured, his voice tight with fear. Secure the perimeter, Miller yelled, pulling out his handcuffs with a harsh metallic ratcheting sound. He clamped the steel cuffs tightly around Harry's wrists, pinching the skin. You're being detained for officer safety. Miller left Harry handcuffed against the car and opened the driver's door. He began tearing the interior apart. He ripped the floor mats out, hurling them onto the highway. He opened the center console, violently pulling out a handful of receipts, a charging cable, and the small framed photograph of Harry's daughter, which shattered as it hit the asphalt. Harry closed his eyes as he heard the glass break. A deep, profound anger began to simmer in his chest, replacing the initial fear. He listened to Miller grunting as he tore the back seat cushions upward, desperate to find anything to justify his illegal actions. "Where are the drugs, Henderson?" Miller shouted from inside the car, his voice muffled by the upholstery. "You got a hidden compartment in here. Huh. You moving product for the city boys?" "There is nothing in that car, Officer Miller," Harry replied, his voice echoing in the quiet night, loud enough to ensure his smartwatch picked up every syllable. "You are maliciously destroying private property. I want your badge number. I want your commanding officer. I want Chief Harrison out here right now." Miller backed out of the car, his face flushed with exertion and anger. He walked up to Harry, stopping inches from his face. "You think you can just name-drop the chief of police and scare me? You think Chief Harrison gives a damn about a street rat like you? You don't know the chief. I am the law out here." Harry looked at the broken glass of his daughter's picture on the ground, then back up at Miller's arrogant, sneering face. A cold, dangerous calm settled over him. "You're right," Harry said softly, a slight, humorless smile touching the corner of his mouth. "I don't know the chief, but I'm pretty sure my brother-in-law does." Before Miller could process the strange phrasing, the distant roar of a high-performance engine shattered the quiet of the night. It wasn't the whine of a standard police cruiser. It sounded like a massive, heavy-block V8. From the north, heading southbound in the northbound lane, a massive jet-black Chevrolet Tahoe came tearing down Route 114. It didn't have a light bar on the roof, but hidden LEDs geared behind the grille were flashing violently in a strobing pattern of solid, unforgiving blue. The Tahoe didn't slow down gracefully. It slammed on its brakes, fishtailing slightly on the gravel shoulder, and skidded to a halt diagonally, completely blocking the front of Miller's police cruiser and boxing the scene in. The dust plumed into the air, caught in the stark white headlights. Officer Wright took a terrified step back, resting his hand on his weapon, unsure of what was happening. Miller narrowed his eyes, squinting into the blinding lights of the Tahoe, his bravado momentarily faltering. The heavy driver's side door of the Tahoe swung open with a resounding thud. A tall, imposing figure stepped out into the strobing blue light. He wasn't wearing a standard uniform. He wore dark tactical trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a heavy gold shield clipped to his belt that caught the light and gleamed like a beacon. It was Chief Robert Harrison, and he looked absolutely furious. Chief Robert Harrison did not walk. He marched. He was a man who had spent 30 years earning his reputation as a hard-nosed, no-nonsense administrator who despised bad cops more than he despised criminals. The heavy gravel crunched beneath his polished boots as he bypassed the patrol car entirely and walked straight toward the Honda Civic. Officer Bradley Miller puffed out his chest, completely misreading the situation. He assumed the sudden arrival of the chief was a stroke of bizarre, cosmic luck, a chance to show off a high-profile bust to the top brass. "Evening, Chief," Miller called out, forcing a confident swagger. "Glad you're here, sir. We caught a live one. Suspect was driving erratically, refused lawful orders, and I've got probable cause for a vehicle search. Smells like a whole distribution operation in that Honda. He's being completely uncooperative." Chief Harrison didn't even look at Miller. His eyes were locked on the man spread-eagled and handcuffed against the dented roof of the Civic. "Harry." Harrison's voice was low, carrying a dangerous edge that made the cold air feel even heavier. "Are you hurt?" Harry turned his head, a wry, exhausted smile forming on his lips. "I'm fine, Robert. Just a little cold. And my wrists are losing circulation." Miller's confident smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of profound, stomach-dropping confusion. "Wait, Chief, you know this suspect?" Harrison finally turned slowly to look at Miller. The look in the chief's eyes was pure, unadulterated venom. "Take the cuffs off him, Miller, right now." "Sir, with all due respect, he's a detained suspect." "I said take the damn cuffs off him," Harrison roared, his voice echoing off the surrounding pine trees with such ferocity that Rookie Officer Wright physically jumped backward. "If those cuffs aren't off his wrists in 3 seconds, I will personally arrest you for kidnapping." Trembling, his thick fingers suddenly feeling like numb blocks of wood, Miller fumbled for his keys. He stepped up to Harry and unlocked the steel bracelets. The loud clack of the metal releasing sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. Harry slowly stood up straight, rubbing his raw, red wrists. He adjusted his Georgetown hoodie, took a deep breath, and turned to face the 2 police officers. The dynamic of power had shifted so violently and absolutely that the air pressure in the space between them seemed to change. "Chief Harrison," Harry said, his voice entirely devoid of the previous civilian deference. It was now the voice of a man who commanded federal courtrooms. "I formally request that you secure Officer Miller's body camera footage, Officer Wright's body camera footage, and the dash cam from Cruiser 44. I also suggest you advise Officer Miller of his Miranda rights." "What the hell is going on here?" Miller stammered, panic finally piercing through his arrogant shell. "Chief, he's a suspect. He's lying." "Shut your mouth, Bradley," Harrison snapped, stepping between Miller and Harry. "Do you have any idea who you just assaulted? Do you have any idea whose car you just tore apart?" "He said his name was Harry Henderson," Miller protested, pointing a shaky finger. "He's just some guy in a beat-up Honda." "He is Harry Henderson," Harrison said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "Senior Supervising Attorney for the United States Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. He is also the lead federal prosecutor for the Joint Federal Task Force currently investigating civil rights abuses in Oak Ridge County. A task force, I might add, that I requested." Harrison paused, letting the devastating weight of those words crush the remaining breath out of Miller's lungs. "And," Harrison added, "he happens to be married to my younger sister, Sarah." Miller's face drained of all color, turning a sickly translucent shade of gray. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The bravado, the bullying sneer, the untouchable aura, it all evaporated, leaving behind a terrified, hollow shell of a man who realized he had just walked willingly into his own execution. Harry tapped the face of his smartwatch, ending the call. "For the record, Robert, my watch has been transmitting a live, encrypted audio feed of this entire interaction directly to a secure server at the FBI field office, monitored by Special Agent Richard Dawson. Agent Dawson is currently logging every threat, every fabricated claim of swerving, and the blatant lie about the odor of marijuana." Harry stepped closer to Miller, who instinctively shrank back. "You didn't pull me over for swerving, Officer Miller," Harry said coldly. "You pulled me over because I was driving an older car in a rich neighborhood. You escalated the stop because I didn't cower in fear when you demanded it. You destroyed private property, specifically a photograph of my 6-year-old daughter, because you wanted to humiliate me. You thought you were in the dark when no one could see you. You thought I was nobody." Harry looked past Miller to the young rookie, Officer Wright. "I am going to ask you a question, and your answer will dictate the entire trajectory of the rest of your life. Did you smell marijuana in my vehicle?" Wright looked at Miller, then at the furious chief of police, and finally at the federal prosecutor. The rookie swallowed hard, tears of pure stress welling in his eyes. "No, sir," Wright said, his voice shaking but clear. "I did not smell marijuana, and the suspect was maintaining his lane perfectly. He was driving exactly the speed limit. I told Officer Miller we had no probable cause. You little rat, Miller hissed, taking a threatening step toward his partner. Don't you even twitch, Miller, Harrison barked, his hand dropping to his duty belt. Give me your badge. Give me your weapon. Right now. You are stripped of all police powers, effective immediately. The fallout was spectacular, swift, and entirely merciless. Officer Bradley Miller was not allowed to drive his cruiser back to the precinct. Chief Harrison ordered him into the back of the Tahoe, uncuffed but thoroughly disgraced, while Rookie Wright was instructed to drive the patrol car back. Another unit was dispatched to safely transport Harry and his damaged vehicle home. By 9 o'clock the following morning, the Oak Ridge County Police Department was swarming with federal agents. The audio recording from Harry's smartwatch, combined with the suppressed but ultimately retrieved body camera footage, which Miller had desperately tried to switch off during the search, provided an airtight, irrefutable narrative of civil rights violations. Miller was formally terminated from the force before noon. But getting fired was merely the opening act of his nightmare, because Harry Henderson was not a man who believed in quiet resignations or swept under the rug settlements. He was a prosecutor who understood that systemic rot required public, painful extraction. He handed the case over to an independent federal team, deliberately recusing himself to ensure there could be no claims of personal bias or conflict of interest in the courtroom. The case was assigned to a bulldog federal prosecutor from a neighboring district, a woman who treated corrupt cops with the same professional courtesy a butcher gives a block of wood. 3 weeks later, Bradley Miller's house was raided by the FBI at 6 o'clock in the morning. Neighbors who had once waved politely to the hero police officer watched in stunned silence as he was led out his front door in heavy steel handcuffs, wearing a faded t-shirt and gym shorts. The federal indictment was a masterclass in legal destruction. Miller was charged under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. But the investigation into his stop of Harry Henderson cracked open a Pandora's box. Once his personnel files were unsealed by a federal judge, a horrifying pattern emerged. Dozens of previous victims, people who had been bullied, illegally searched, or falsely arrested by Miller, but lacked the money, power, or connections to fight back, came forward. Because Officer Wright, terrified of federal prison, agreed to testify fully and openly against his former training officer, the blue wall of silence completely shattered. Wright detailed how Miller explicitly trained rookies to target minorities, fabricate probable cause, and escalate situations to justify force. The trial was a media circus, but inside the courtroom, it was a slaughter. Miller's defense attorney, a high-priced lawyer accustomed to defending cops in friendly local courts, was entirely out of his depth in federal court against a mountain of digital evidence and first-hand police testimony. When Miller took the stand, attempting to portray himself as a proactive cop making split-second decisions in a dangerous world, the federal prosecutor played the audio of him calling Harry "boy-eye" and mocking the idea of the chief of police caring about a street rat. The jury's faces turned to stone. The verdict took less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. On the day of sentencing, Harry Henderson sat quietly in the back row of the gallery. He wore a sharp-tailored navy suit, his armor. He watched as Bradley Miller, now wearing a bright orange county jail jumpsuit, stood trembling before the federal judge. The judge, an austere woman with zero tolerance for the abuse of authority, looked down at Miller with sheer disgust. "Mr. Miller," the judge began, her voice echoing in the grand wood-paneled room, "you were entrusted with a badge, a gun, and the immense power of the state. You were supposed to be a shield for the vulnerable. Instead, you acted as a predator. You relied on the assumption that your victims had no voice, no power, and no recourse. You chose the wrong man to victimize on Route 114. But your true crime is the years you spent terrorizing those who didn't have the chief of police on speed dial. Miller wept openly, begging for leniency, citing his years of service, his family, and his ruined pension. It was a pathetic display of a bully suddenly subjected to the very helplessness he had inflicted on others for a decade. "Your pension is forfeit," the judge declared coldly, "and society requires protection from your brand of law enforcement. I sentence you to 96 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. 8 years, no parole in the federal system." As the U.S. Marshals moved in to take Miller away, the disgraced former cop locked eyes with Harry Henderson across the courtroom. There was no defiance left in Miller's eyes, only the crushing, suffocating realization of absolute defeat. Harry didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply offered a single slow nod, a silent acknowledgement that the scales of justice had finally, violently balanced themselves. Officer Thomas Wright resigned from the police force shortly after the trial. Though he wasn't charged criminally due to his cooperation, the guilt of what he had almost allowed to happen haunted him. He returned to school, eventually opening a community center focused on bridging the gap between at-risk youth and legal advocacy programs. Harry Henderson went back to work. His daughter's photograph was replaced with a new, stronger frame. And while the memory of that cold night on Route 114 never fully faded, it served as a permanent, burning fuel for his career. Every time he stood before a jury, he remembered the feeling of the cold metal against his cheek and the heavy, arrogant breath of a tyrant who thought he was above the law. And he dedicated his life to making absolutely sure that men like Bradley Miller would always, eventually, meet the dark, terrifying reality of the consequences they had earned. If this story of absolute justice and hard karma hit home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button to support real accountability. Share this video to remind everyone that nobody is above the law, and subscribe to the channel for more intense, real-life stories where the bullies finally get exactly what they deserve. Leave a comment below with your thoughts.